All right, welcome back to Vuln Vibes, everybody. You know what time it is.
Time for another WP Safe Block.
That's right, and you know what that means.
We're diving headfirst into some WordPress vulnerabilities.
That's right. Today we're going to look at a couple that might make you sweat a little bit if you haven't updated your site in a while.
Yeah, you might want to grab a towel because these vulnerabilities are pretty juicy.
Okay, so let's jump right in. First up, we've got the PostGrid Slider and Carousel Ultimate plugin.
That's a mouthful.
Yeah, I know, right? Anyway, versions up to 1.6.10 have a bit of a problem.
What kind of problem are we talking about here?
Well, it's what's called a local file inclusion vulnerability, or LFI for short.
LFI. Those are never fun.
So when I hear local file inclusion, I always think of like someone breaking into my house and going through my stuff. Is that kind of on the right track?
It's not a terrible analogy. Basically, an LFI lets attackers sneak into the back end of your website and access files they shouldn't be able to.
So like someone finding my hidden stash of embarrassing photos?
Something like that. But instead of photos, it could be sensitive user data, your website's code, or even worse.
Okay, so it's definitely not just embarrassing photos then. What exactly can attackers do with this LFI in the PostGrid plugin?
Well, in this case, they can use it to execute arbitrary files on the server.
So like they can run their own code on my website?
Exactly. And that basically gives them control over your site. They could deface it, steal data, redirect visitors to malicious websites. The possibilities are pretty scary.
That is scary. So it sounds like we need to be really careful with this plugin. Who's at risk here?
Anyone with contributor access or higher on a WordPress site using this plugin.
So even if someone doesn't have full admin privileges, they could still exploit this.
That's right. And that's why it's so important to be mindful of user roles and permissions on your site.
Okay, duly noted. Now, I know we've got another LFI to talk about, this time in a theme. Tell me about the Bootstrap Ultimate theme.
So with Bootstrap Ultimate, the vulnerability is tied to the path parameter. And this one is a real doozy because it affects everyone.
Everyone. Even people who aren't logged into my site?
Yep. Even visitors just browsing your site could be potential targets.
That's wild. So what kind of damage are we talking about here?
Well, at a minimum, attackers could use this vulnerability to read sensitive files from your server. But if your server has php.filter enabled, things can get much worse.
php.filter. What's that?
It's a PHP feature that's often enabled by default. And if it is, this LFI can be escalated to remote code execution.
Remote code execution. That sounds bad.
It is bad. It basically means attackers can run any code they want on your server from anywhere in the world. They could take complete control of your site, steal data, install malware, you name it.
Yikes. So what can our listeners do to protect themselves from these vulnerabilities?
The number one thing is to keep your WordPress core, plugins, and themes updated. That's the most basic, but also the most important step in securing your site.
So if people listening are using the PostGrid plugin or the Bootstrap Ultimate theme, they need to update right away.
Absolutely. Update to the latest versions ASAP.
And if they can't update right away?
Well, if updating isn't feasible immediately, there are some temporary measures you can take. You could try disabling the plugin or theme if possible, but that might break some functionality on your site.
Right. What else?
Another thing you can do is restrict user access. The fewer people who have high-level permissions on your site, the better. And of course, you should always have strong passwords and two-factor authentication enabled.
All good advice. Anything else our listeners should keep in mind?
Just remember that WordPress security is an ongoing process. You can't just set it and forget it. Keep an eye out for security updates, stay informed about emerging threats, and be proactive about protecting your site.
Couldn't have said it better myself. All right, folks, that's it for another WP Safe Block here on Vuln Vibes.
Stay safe out there.
And keep those WordPress sites updated. We'll catch you next time.
Bye, everyone.
See ya.